Hello, and welcome to the Ultimate Strategy Podcast, your go-to podcast for everything strategy. Each week, we'll share a new episode covering a wide range of topics designed to help your business grow smarter by making strategy both approachable and actionable. I am Miriam, Lesa, Strategy Execution Director here at Cascade.
And I'm Laura Blackmore, Head of Strategy Execution. Hi and welcome. We're excited to have you with us today. This is just the beginning though, so stay tuned for weekly episodes. Before we dive in, let me thank today's sponsor, Cascade. They are the #1 strategy execution platform that help turn visions into reality by working as the strategic brain of your organization. Thousands of top organizations around the world use Cascade to plan, execute, and track their strategies in one place by improving efficiency and speeding up decision making. By successfully executing their strategies, Cascade customers are making a huge difference, from deploying life-saving vaccines to engineering the fastest Formula One car. If you want to get your team moving towards your vision in one central platform, check out Cascade at www.cascade.app. We'll leave the link in the episode notes. Now, let's get started. Culture eats strategy for breakfast is a famous quote from Peter Drucker. To be clear, he didn't mean that strategy was unimportant, rather that a powerful and empowering culture was a super route to organizational success. So let's unpick how to do that successfully.
Yeah, and you know what I find is so interesting, Laura? I see so many organizations, they build out these amazing strategies and they probably have everything that, or they think they have everything that it takes to execute their strategy. They have this great plan. They have those ambitious goals and they have probably some sort of a communication plan. And then they just want to get it done. But I find often, we know, for example, that execution, around 90% of strategies fail in execution. That's a lot. So we also know that a lot of those strategies fail because if you're executing, you cannot only focus on that kind of left brain side of these are the facts, this is what you're going to do. Strategy execution ultimately is like a big change process that is hitting the organization. Sometimes more, sometimes less. Sometimes strategy is like this really great growth strategy, then the change process is a lot easier. But sometimes a strategy can also have elements of cost reduction and more focus on profitability, then it's a lot harder. Either way, it's a change process. It means ways of working might change, focus for people might change. So we have to think about the right brain as well, right? And I've seen this play out in so many ways. I've seen great strategies fail because they're only focusing on, we need to get this done. People don't buy in, and especially if you don't get the middle management to buy in, it's really hard to execute successfully. And I know we're going to unpack that a lot more, but the only strategies that I really see being successfully executed is when everybody who is responsible to drive the strategy from top to bottom is really also focused on that kind of right brain side, tapping into the emotional culture as well of the organization, understanding what's going on, talking about the why, talking about why change is happening, talking about why the strategy is getting them to where it has to get to, and really tap into the values and the power of the why to get people on board to execute the strategy, good or bad, whatever the strategy is and wherever it leads you to. But I find that was a big learning for me to see when organizations are successful in strategy versus the ones that are less successful or have it a lot harder to get to where they want to get to.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think a lot of people think that culture and strategy execution are two separate, very different things entirely. But I think for me, having one without the other is a recipe for disaster personally. For example, you can have an amazing culture, but no one's really working on the right things and your business isn't growing. But you know what? Everyone's really happy to be there and your business is just kind of stagnant. Or you can have amazing strategy execution and you're really growing, but people absolutely hate their lives and are miserable and nobody really wants to come in and do a good job. And honestly, even if your business is doing super well, if you've got people coming to work that don't really want to be there and they're not really living their best lives and they're really not putting their best effort in, you are leaving money on the table, in my opinion. So getting the balance of the two of them together can be really really well thought out. And actually, one of my favorite examples, I don't know if I'm sure you've seen this before, is, back in the day when Netflix completely reinvented their HR team. They really implemented this philosophy of trusting your people, not implementing just the policies, rewarding candor, throwing away the standard playbook around how you do business, but really getting their whole organization to live and breathe the culture so that they could execute the strategy well. And I think one of my best examples of how to do culture and strategy well, or where they meet at sort of the intersection, if you like, is not just having your company values as this kind of nice looking poster on the wall or a nice little thing on your careers page, but actually you hold your people responsible for the skills and the behaviors that you want. You actively seek those skills and behaviors when you're making hiring or promotion decisions, and you only promote the people who truly live and breathe all of those values, and you hold everybody accountable for those values as part of your business. And it's okay to also refresh them if they're no longer working for the business that you have, but I think having the values really nailed down and your vision really nailed down are kind of the starting points to having a great culture and great strategy execution. What do you think? Where have you seen that work?
I agree 100%. I think that's the baseline to have a great strategy execution. And I've lived that myself in my previous company as well. At Adidas, we had really strong values, and they were widely communicated, and we were like, it was connected to the performance system, which is another element that I find is very important to think about. Like, how is the performance system connected to your strategy, connected to your values? If it's all connected, it makes just a lot more sense for people, because ultimately there is still the money part that's also driving employees beyond the part that is around the purpose and the why and where they're coming to work every day. So it all needs to be there. It's the full package. It's not one or the other. But bringing that together is really, really important to create the baseline. And you're so right. Like, it's not the nice poster, or if they're written down somewhere, you have to truly live it and talk about it. And it obviously starts like on the top, right? If the leadership is living it and talking about it all the time, if we see different examples, how people are living it, or if it's also celebrated more. I've seen this being really, really successful. And you can tell, like, it just becomes part of the person, it becomes part of the culture, and ultimately the execution of the strategy is so much more successful as people are living the values that are essentially what you need to execute those strategies. So 100% I would agree with that.
And what would you say to, let's say, for example, somebody's listening right now and they don't work for maybe a well-known brand or a huge organization, and maybe the vision is a little bit complicated, or maybe they don't know the vision, maybe they don't even know the values, but they want to help build a great culture at this organization. What advice do you think you could give them to get behind that, or lead from the front, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's like building a vision and building out values. It's not everybody's cup of tea, right? Like some leaders are also more practical. Some are more like into vision, mission. I know, like, we're maybe a little bit more into it, but it depends on the person. But ultimately, getting the team around you to help you build the vision and the mission, and together with the values, that's obviously super critical, and it's important for everybody, because we also have to think about everybody's a little bit different in the organization. And for some, values are going to resonate a lot more. For some, maybe a little less. For some, only the money matters. And for some, the strategy matters. And they really need to be connected and have this purpose to come to work every day. So again, tapping a little bit more into this emotional culture and the emotional intelligence of the organization and the different individuals. We have to kind of, as an organization, serve them all to a certain degree in order to be successful. So I find, like, as an advice, I would say put the right team together and get help to execute, or to set this up in a simple way. I think that's the other thing. It can be simple. It doesn't have to be very complicated. It doesn't have to be very sophisticated. It can be simple. It needs to be authentic. And then it can also be lived, but it needs to be true to what the leader also believes.
So I guess, like, two things that come to mind then is you almost want to have empowerment in your teams, and also, paired with accountability, I guess. Like, you want to, especially if you're a leader, you can lead from the front, but also give that empowerment and accountability to your teams as well, sounds like.
Totally.
What about, what are your thoughts on, we mentioned in an earlier podcast, sort of this performance and like performance culture and reward and recognition. How do you think that plays a part in the strategy and culture? I know what I think, because I feel like it's all super, super connected, but what are your thoughts on where that plays in?
Yeah, I think it is completely connected. And I mentioned it briefly as well. I think the performance system of an organization should be connected to the strategy. There should also be a personal element in the performance system, because you also want to encourage the personal growth. So it needs to be connected, but it needs to also be a combination in an ideal world, and or that's at least what I've seen being successful. Yeah, bringing it together, catering to the different needs of the employees, but still creating also that level of focus, the level of accountability, because that's also part of strategy execution, and really showing employees like how, or individuals, how they are connected to the strategy is very, very important. That means like building out a strategy execution. Again, it doesn't stop on a certain level. Ideally, everybody in the organization sees how they contribute to the bigger strategy, and they find something in their work where they know this is meaningful to the bigger strategy. And that is also very possible. It's just a matter of how you're setting up the performance system, but also how you set up a strategy. But connecting all of that and aligning teams and individuals to the strategy is very powerful, because it's creating focus, it's creating accountability, it's also creating connection, and that is a great baseline for successful strategy execution, in my opinion.
I think something you said that's super important around kind of giving people the authority to make decisions. Like for me, for example, some of the most successful but also happiest parts of my career are working for organizations where regardless of what level of the organization was on, I had very, very clear goals, and something that I could sort of attribute my impact to, but also feel rewarded when I hit those milestones as well. I think, again, going back to sort of, you said strategy execution doesn't kind of stop at certain levels. I think it's super important that everybody has some aspect of the strategy. And I think if you think about the sort of cascading effect of strategy, you've got the leaders, the C-suite or beyond at the top, who basically own the vision. And then as you drop throughout the organization, you've kind of got then the themes or the focus areas that executives might be trying to get behind. For example, revenue growth, a financial leader might be behind that. And then as you go throughout that sort of pyramid, if you like, you then have your objectives kind of cascading down throughout the organization. And once you kind of get to the individual contributor level, it's more about the daily tasks, maybe, how many calls they're picking up or how many emails they're replying to if they work in like a call center. But every single person in the business should be attributing their impact in some way, and it should feed all the way up to the top. So if that person on the shop floor or an individual contributor knows what they are responsible for, it feeds all the way back up to the leaders and beyond, and you can really attribute that impact throughout. And I think that's something that I see where the culture and the strategy execution don't really work out that well, is when you don't have a culture of continuously being agile with your strategy, or even getting it out on the desk or in the paper, or getting it out in the PowerPoint, wherever it lives. Getting it out for the world or all your employees to see is one of the quite important parts of the culture, to regularly almost be putting it in people's faces and being like, this is what we're striving for. This is why we're here. This is why you come into work. And really getting people behind that and reminding everybody of the impact that they're making can be hugely powerful, and it doesn't cost anything.
It doesn't. Yeah. I 100% agree. I do see there is a lot of power in over communicating strategy or a vision or a mission or whatever you want your team to really get behind. There is a lot of power in that. I think sometimes we think, oh, but we've already said that, or we've already communicated that. People need sometimes like 8, 9 times or more to actually truly notice something. And if it's being said once, that's probably not enough. We're stimulated with so much information. And I know it's like your company, you should like know it technically, but people forget. People have a lot of stuff going on. So it needs to be constantly out there and reminded, because you want to create a culture, right? So it takes time. So you want to, I always find, like, especially as you're maybe embarking on a new strategy journey, and maybe that you have changed your goals slightly, or there's just like, again, like some newness to it. I always recommend, because I've seen that being successful myself, is rather over communicate and go like a little bit overboard with it in many ways, in a good way, than not enough. Because again, like, you want to get people in. It's always easier to kind of then slowly scale down as people start to truly live it and be in it and they're fully bought in. And then you can like slowly like go a little bit, like maybe from the weekly communication, you go to the every other week or every month or whatever it is with the strategy, whatever that may be. But it doesn't hurt. I've seen that for sure.
Yeah, it's funny actually you mentioned it. It took me back to a time in an organization that I would say had great culture and great strategy execution. And I always remember as having, one of those strategy away days. But I think what was the most important piece of that was not the free dinner or the fun little team, raft building or whatever we did. It was actually that they got the strategy printed out on massive posters, and each poster was the focus that we had for that particular year. And then they had like cupcakes and stickers with the values, and they never left me because it was such a visual cue, and it was quite easy and cheap to do. But it was, those posters were around all the time. But equally, you could still do the same sort of thing in a remote business or in other businesses. I've been to hospital appointments lately where they have their strategy on big posters, and I think not being afraid to just always having it in people's faces. I mean, easier said than done, especially when you want, like, I think one thing that we both would agree with is that businesses need that ability to and pivot quite quickly, especially, we've seen how much things change even in the last year through, implementation of AI or new prime ministers in certain countries. There's a lot of like policies and changes happening very rapidly that I don't think has really been the case in years before. So I think that ability to adapt and pivot quickly is something I'd love to pick your brain on a little bit more.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, I think there is the difference between adapt and pivot quickly, but then there is still like, there should still probably be some sort of like steadiness in the longer term vision that is out there. I feel like the vision is probably somewhere there, but the adjustment happens in the strategy for sure, right? Like how you might maybe choose to do certain things differently or anything around that, but values on the vision, that should be, in my opinion, a little bit more steady, a little bit more longer term. And of course, sometimes visions are being made redundant, right, through change. Then of course you have a different situation at hand. But for that to happen, let's assume that's not the norm to happen in this agile world. But yeah, of course, there has to be some adaptation but that requires also, how do you almost train your people to have that agile mindset, right? The one thing is what you do and how you shift your strategy. The other thing is, how do you train your people to really stay agile, stay in this like continuous improvement mindset with a growth mindset at hand, and who are more flexible to things that happen and want to adjust and adapt and be flexible, because it takes a lot, right? Like change can be really tiring. It can, like, you can create change fatigue. So you have to be mindful as well, like how much of that are you like, what is the change that you like adjust to that's happening out there, and what is it that you might need to let pass, or you might need to wait, or whatever it is. So it's a fine line and a fine balance, but I think maybe want to come a little bit as well to just the element of the individuals and how to help them have this mindset of continuous learning, continuous improvement, especially if you are executing a strategy. And even if it is very agile, what are what I find was very powerful. I was like part of like a really big, leading a really big rollout of an organizational change, which is obviously a really tough project and lots of people affected. But who are the change agents that you need that can help you with the progress? Who can advocate for it? whatever kind of project that may be or strategy that you want to get out there, who are the change agents in your organization that you need to have on board? And those do not only need to be the ones who are always like, yeah, great, I'll do anything. Those should also be the ones who have the critical voice and who might actually potentially not necessarily be in favor of the change. But if you can convince those to be your change agents, whether it's in the strategy execution or whether you are like just like going through some agile changes, have them on your side and build them as your allies to kind of just have a couple more people in the organization
Infiltrate.
speaking the same language. Infiltrate. It's like a little army. So in the best way possible. So that's another thing that I find was very, very effective from my experience. I don't know if you've seen that anywhere in your experience as well.
Yeah, I've definitely seen that. I think it's really important. Like it's, it's not something you can achieve with one person or even a small team. You need that, again, going back to what we said in an earlier podcast, so that kind of like that broad thinking and different perspectives. I think you hit the nail on the head, getting people who aren't just they're holding their hand up. It's the quiet ones. What are your opinions? What are your thoughts? And inviting them into it as well. I think some closing thoughts as well from me. I think you mentioned around that continuous learning and adaptation. I think two things that are also super, super important is fostering an environment where new ideas are welcome. And I think it's really important not to just say yes to every idea, but at least make people feel comfortable to bring those ideas, because often those ideas come from the shop floor or the individual contributors that are in front of the customers or in front of, whatever it might be in the weeds of the business, and they can have some amazing ideas. So also, bringing them on the journey of that kind of strategy execution, but having the culture where it's welcomed and it's, you're fostering that. And then I think the second piece, which almost comes hand in hand, but is super important, is like promoting that culture where failure is seen as a learning opportunity and you're not actually, yes, of course, if major things happen, of course, you have to do something with that. But, you don't always have to discipline people for a failure that maybe was outside of their control, but really using it as an opportunity to learn from it. And I've got tons of examples where I failed in my career and actually it's been a springboard for something better. So I think fostering that as well. So remember, a thriving culture is not built overnight, but with deliberate actions and consistent effort and strong leadership that consistently empowers their people, that's how you build a great culture and great strategy execution.
To summarize what we've learned in this podcast, let's take a quick look at the 3 key takeaways. So first of all, we said we want to align culture with strategy, really break it down through the right values, the right vision, over-communicate if needed, make it part of your performance system. And then the second element, empowerment and accountability, really bringing in the people and empower them to be part of what you do here, breaking again everything down to allow them to really see how they're part of the bigger picture. And last but not least, what Laura also just mentioned, part of that is continuous learning and helping employees to also see that they can learn through failure and fostering that innovative environment with a growth mindset.
And that wraps up today's episode on creating a culture that supports strategy execution. Hopefully you found it insightful and that it helps you on your journey to better strategy execution.
Make sure to tune in next week when we will be talking about how to execute your strategy with speed. It's going to be a great episode filled with practical tips, so you don't want to miss it.
And in the meantime, don't forget to subscribe to the Ultimate Strategy Podcast on your favorite platform so you never miss an episode. Check out the links to the resources that we mentioned today, and a big thank you to Cascade for making this podcast possible.
Thanks for listening, and remember, great strategies are only as good as their execution.
So take action, make it happen, and see the results. See you in the next episode of your weekly dose of strategy.